The clock struck to 45 p.m. and the boardroom on the 42nd floor of Morgan Holdings pulsed with the kind of tension that could shatter glass. Noah Morgan sat at the head of the mahogany table, his emerald eyes cutting through the assembled executives like surgical blades. The autumn sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows caught the sharp angles of his face, highlighting the ruthless precision that had built his empire. This proposal is absolutely worthless. His voice sliced through the air with the authority of a man who had never heard the word no and meant it. I expected innovation, not this elementary school presentation. Either bring me something worthy of my time, or consider this partnership terminated. The executives across from him exchanged nervous glances, their expensive suits suddenly feeling too tight. Nobody dared to speak. Noah Morgan was legendary for his perfectionism, his zero tolerance for mediocrity, and his ability to destroy careers with a single glance. But as he leaned forward to deliver another cutting remark, something unexpected happened. A sharp pain shot through his chest, followed by a wave of dizziness that made the room tilt sideways. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white against the dark wood. Not now, he thought desperately, loosening his silk tie as if it were strangling him. The voices around him became muffled, distant, as his vision began to blur at the edges. In the corner of the room, Mia Clark looked up from her notebook. As the youngest administrative assistant in the company, she usually remained invisible during these high-level meetings, taking notes and staying silent, but something in Noah's posture made her brown eyes widen with concern. While everyone else remained focused on their humiliation, Mia saw what they missed. The most powerful man in the room was about to collapse. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the awkward silence as she stood abruptly. Chairs scraped against marble as heads turned toward her, confusion written across every face. "Mr. Morgan, are you all right?" Noah tried to respond, but the words stuck in his throat like broken glass. His legs felt like water, and the room spun around him in slow motion. Without hesitation, Mia moved. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides, reaching him just as his knees buckled. Her small hands caught his arm, supporting his weight with surprising strength as she guided him back into his chair. "Do you need medical attention?" she whispered, positioning herself between Noah and the gawking executives. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice remained steady. Noah managed a slight shake of his head. He couldn't show weakness. Not here. Not in front of these people who would use any sign of vulnerability against him. "Water," he managed to rasp. Mia grabbed a crystal glass from the side table and helped him drink, her fingers briefly touching his as she steadied the glass. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them, but she maintained her focus. When some color returned to his face, she made a decision that would change everything. "The meeting is over," she announced to the room with quiet authority. That surprised everyone, including herself. "Mr. Morgan needs to rest." The executives filed out reluctantly, whispers already beginning before they reached the door. Mia waited until they were alone before helping Noah to his feet. "Come on," she said softly. "Let me get you to your office." They walked slowly down the empty hallway, her arm supporting him with a gentleness he hadn't experienced in years. The click of her modest heels against marble was the only sound breaking the silence of the executive floor. Noah's corner office was a monument to success, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Manhattan. But as he collapsed into his leather chair, none of it mattered. "What happened back there?" Mia asked, kneeling beside his chair with genuine concern etched across her features. "Nothing, just a moment of discomfort." "I'm fine," Noah said, but his voice lacked its usual commanding tone. Mia studied his face, noting the pallor that hadn't quite faded, and the way his hands still trembled slightly. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. "You should drink more water," she said, retrieving a bottle from his desk. "And maybe consider seeing a doctor." "I don't need a doctor," Noah replied, but he accepted the water gratefully. "Everyone needs help sometimes," Mia said quietly, and something in her tone made him really look at her for the first time. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense that graced magazine covers or walked red carpets. There was something luminous about her, a warmth that seemed to radiate from within. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes were clearly off the rack, but she carried herself with a dignity that all his money couldn't buy. Why did you help me? Noah asked suddenly, his green eyes searching her face. Mia blinked, surprised by the question. Because you needed help, and nobody else seemed to notice. The simplicity of her answer stunned him into silence. In his world, every action had a motive. Every kindness came with a price tag. But Mia Clark had helped him, expecting nothing in return. As the afternoon wore on, and Mia finally left his office, Noah found himself unable to concentrate on anything else. He stared out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. But all he could see was a pair of compassionate brown eyes and a smile that had asked for nothing in return. For the first time in his adult life, Noah Morgan was intrigued by something money couldn't buy. Noah Morgan was not a man accustomed to sleepless nights, yet as his sleek Bentley carved through Manhattan's evening traffic, his mind refused to quiet. The leather seat that usually provided comfort felt foreign against his back as images from the boardroom played on repeat behind his closed eyelids, her hands steady and sure as they guided him to safety, her voice cutting through chaos with unwavering calm. But most disturbing of all was the way she had looked at him, not with the calculating greed he was used to, but with genuine human concern. Sir, we've arrived, his driver announced, as they pulled up to the private elevator that accessed Noah's penthouse. The 40-story ascent to his home felt longer than usual. When the doors opened to reveal his sanctuary of glass and steel with its panoramic views of the city he owned, Noah felt an unfamiliar emptiness settle in his chest. He poured himself 3 fingers of 25-year-old scotch and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city pulse with life below. The whiskey burned, but it didn't quiet the questions racing through his mind. Pulling out his phone, he dialed his personal assistant. Jacobs, I need you to compile a complete file on one of our employees. Of course, sir. Which department? Administrative? Mia Clark. I want everything. Background, employment history, personal circumstances. Everything. There was a pause on the other end. Sir, is there a specific reason for investigating Ms. Clark? Just get it done. First thing tomorrow morning. Noah ended the call and returned to his whiskey. But the burn in his throat couldn't match the fire of curiosity consuming him from within. 20 miles away in Queens, Mia Clark climbed the stairs to her modest 2-bedroom apartment, her legs heavy with exhaustion. The building was old. The hallway smelled faintly of cooking oil and cleaning supplies, but it was home. Mia, is that you? Called a voice from the kitchen as she turned her key in the lock. Who else would it be? She replied, managing a smile as her 19-year-old brother Ethan appeared in the doorway, textbooks tucked under his arm. Ethan had their father's dark hair and their mother's gentle eyes. But lately those eyes carried worry lines that belonged on someone much older. He was home from community college for the evening, probably studying for midterms again. How was work? He asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew it hadn't been routine. Interesting, Mia said, hanging her coat on the hook by the door. How was school? The usual. Professor Martinez assigned another paper that's going to consume my soul. Ethan's attempt at humor didn't quite mask his fatigue, but I got the work-study position at the library. It's not much, but every little bit helps. Mia felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she thought about money. Between her salary, Ethan's part-time jobs, and the scholarships he'd managed to secure, they were barely keeping their heads above water. The medical bills from their parents' accident 5 years ago still arrived monthly, a cruel reminder of the night that had changed everything. That's wonderful news, she said, meaning it. I'm proud of you. They shared a simple dinner of pasta and sauce, talking about everything except the elephant in the room, how Mia was slowly drowning trying to keep them both afloat. Afterward, as Ethan retreated to his room to study, Mia sat at their small kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. The numbers, as always, didn't add up in their favor. At exactly 8 a.m. the next morning, Jacobs entered Noah's office, carrying a manila folder as if it contained state secrets. He placed it carefully on the polished desk and stepped back. Is this everything I requested? Noah asked without looking up from his computer. Yes, sir. Complete as requested. Noah dismissed him with a wave, waiting until the door clicked shut before opening the folder. What he found inside made him set down his coffee cup with unusual care. Mia Clark, 24 years old, had been working at Morgan Holdings for exactly 2 years and 3 months. Employment record was spotless, punctual, and diligent, with glowing reviews from every supervisor. But it was her personal life that made Noah's chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. Both parents killed in a car accident when she was 19, and Ethan was 14. She had become his legal guardian overnight, sacrificing her plans for law school to take care of him. The medical bills and funeral costs had left them buried in debt that she was still paying off, dollar by painful dollar. She lived in Queens, took the subway to work every day, and according to the financial information, was exactly 3 paychecks away from disaster at any given moment. Noah leaned back in his chair, the folder resting on his lap. For the first time in years, he felt something that resembled shame. While he decided which of his homes to visit on weekends, Mia Clark was choosing between groceries and utilities. But more than that, he felt something else entirely. A pull towards someone whose strength wasn't measured in stock portfolios or real estate holdings, but in the quiet courage it took to rebuild a life from ashes and never let anyone see you break. An hour later, Mia's phone buzzed with a message that made her hand shake. Please report to conference room A at 2 p.m. for a meeting with senior management. She stared at the screen, her stomach dropping. Had someone complained about her intervention yesterday? Was she about to lose the job that kept her and Ethan afloat? At exactly 2 p.m., Mia knocked on the door of conference room A, her heart hammering against her ribs. When she entered, she found Noah Morgan sitting alone at the massive table, his green eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. Please, sit down, he said, his voice softer than she remembered. Mia chose a chair several seats away from him, her notebook clutched in her hands like a shield. I wanted to thank you, Noah said after a moment of silence that felt eternal. For yesterday, I never properly acknowledged what you did. It wasn't necessary, Mr. Morgan. Anyone would have done the same. No, he said firmly, leaning forward. They wouldn't have, and we both know it. The truth of his words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. I've been thinking about your future here at Morgan Holdings, Noah continued, and Mia's blood turned to ice. Your work has been exemplary, and I believe it deserves recognition. He slid a document across the table toward her. Active immediately. You're receiving a significant salary increase, along with additional paid time off to manage any personal commitments you might have. Mia stared at the paper, the number swimming before her eyes. The raise was more than she made in 3 months. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would you do this? Noah studied her face, noting the way her brown eyes widened with disbelief rather than calculation. Another woman might have seen opportunity and pounced. Mia Clark saw kindness and questioned it. Consider it recognition for seeing something in me that others missed, he said quietly. As Mia left the meeting in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities she had never dared to imagine, Noah remained in the conference room, staring at the chair where she had sat. He was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, when he wanted it. But Mia Clark was different from anything he had ever desired before. She wasn't something to be acquired or possessed. She was someone to be earned. And Noah Morgan was about to discover that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought with money, only with the one thing he had never learned to give freely, his heart. 3 weeks after the raise that had changed everything, Mia found herself working late in the empty administrative wing of Morgan Holdings. The city sparkled beyond the windows as she finished the quarterly reports that had taken her half the time they should have, thanks to her newfound financial peace of mind. For the first time in 5 years, she had paid all their bills with money left over. Ethan had been able to quit his evening job at the grocery store to focus on his studies. The weight that had pressed against her chest for so long had finally begun to lift. She was gathering her papers when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her pulse quickened as Noah appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened and his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. Working late again, Miss Clark? Quarterly reports needed to be finished, she replied, acutely aware that they were alone on the floor. I didn't realize you were still here. I could say the same about you. Noah stepped into the small office space, and suddenly the room felt impossibly intimate. "Have you eaten dinner?" The question caught her off guard. "I was planning to. Grab something on the way home. There's a place a few blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but the food is good." Noah's invitation hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to voice. "Would you like to join me?" Mia's rational mind screamed warnings about boundaries and workplace appropriateness. But something in his eyes made her nod before she could think better of it. "I'd like that." The restaurant was indeed nothing fancy, a small Italian place with checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and fresh bread filling the air. Noah had never eaten anywhere so unpretentious, and he found himself oddly charmed. By the way, Mia's face lit up at the warmth of it. "This reminds me of a place my parents used to take us," she said, running her fingers over the worn tablecloth. "When money wasn't so tight." "Tell me about them," Noah said, and the genuine interest in his voice surprised them both. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, Mia found herself sharing memories she had locked away for years. Her father's terrible jokes that made her mother laugh anyway. Sunday dinners that lasted for hours, the way they had danced in the kitchen while she and Ethan groaned in embarrassment. They would have loved seeing Ethan in college, she said, her voice growing soft with old grief. "Mom always said he was going to change the world." "What about you?" Noah asked. "What did you want to change?" Mia's laugh held no humor. "I wanted to be a lawyer. I was going to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves." Naive, I suppose. Why naive? Because life had other plans. She took a sip of wine, meeting his eyes across the table. "What about you? Did you always want to rule a corporate empire?" Noah considered the question, realizing no one had ever asked him what he wanted, only what he planned to achieve. "I wanted to matter," he said finally. To build something that would outlast me. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why that was important." The conversation flowed between them like wine, easy and intoxicating. Found himself sharing stories he had never told anyone, while Mia discovered that beneath the ruthless exterior was a man who had been lonely for so long he had forgotten what connection felt like. When they finally left the restaurant, the streets were quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. They walked slowly back toward the building where Noah's car waited, neither wanting the evening to end. "Thank you," Mia said as they reached the sleek Bentley, for dinner and for everything else. "You've changed my life." "You've changed mine first," Noah replied, his voice rough with honesty. They stood facing each other on the sidewalk, the space between them charged with electricity. Noah reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Mia," he whispered, and she saw her own longing reflected in his eyes. But before either of them could close the distance between them, Mia's phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, and reality crashed back over her like cold water. "I have to take this," she said, stepping away from Noah's touch. "Ethan, what's wrong?" Her brother's voice was tight with panic. "Mia, I'm at the hospital. I was walking home from class, and some guys jumped me. They took my wallet and my phone, and I think my arm might be broken." The blood drained from Mia's face. "Which hospital?" "I'm coming right now." "Queens General, but Mia, I don't have insurance cards or anything." "Told him I'd call my sister, but don't worry about that. Just stay calm. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She ended the call, her hands shaking as she tried to process what had happened. "What's wrong?" Noah asked, his voice sharp with concern. "My brother. He's been mugged, he's hurt, and he's at the hospital without insurance information." Mia looked around frantically, trying to remember where the nearest subway station was. "I have to go. I'll drive you," Noah said immediately. "No, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering." During the 20-minute drive to Queens, Noah listened as Mia called the hospital, her insurance company, and tried to reach Ethan again. Her composure was cracking, and he could see the girl who had been holding the world, together by sheer force of will, finally beginning to buckle under the weight. "He's all I have left," she whispered as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. "Something happens to him?" "Nothing is going to happen to him," Noah said firmly, covering her hand with his. "We'll make sure of it." They found Ethan in the emergency room, his left arm in a temporary sling and a bruise darkening his cheek. Despite the circumstances, he managed a weak smile when he saw Mia rushing toward him. "Hey, sis. I know how this looks, but you should see the other guys." "This isn't funny," Mia said, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him carefully. "You could have been killed, but I wasn't. I'm fine, just a little banged up." Noah watched from a few feet away as the siblings held each other, something unfamiliar and painful twisting in his chest. He had never had anyone who would drop everything and race across the city for him. He had never been anyone's whole world. A doctor approached with clipboard and apologetic smile. "Ms. Clark? I'm Dr. Patterson. Your brother is going to be fine. But we need to run a few more tests and get some x-rays. The arm doesn't appear to be broken, but we want to be thorough." "Of course, whatever he needs," Mia said quickly. "About the insurance, actually," Noah interjected, stepping forward. "I'd like to speak with the billing department. This will be handled privately." Both Mia and Ethan stared at him as if he had appeared out of thin air. "Mr. Morgan," Mia began. "You can't possibly." "I can and I will," Noah said in a tone that brooked no argument. "Let me take care of this." As he walked away to find the billing office, Ethan turned to his sister with raised eyebrows. "Who exactly is that guy, and why does he look like he wants to buy the entire hospital?" Mia watched Noah's retreating figure, her heart racing with emotion she couldn't name. "That," she said quietly, "is a very good question." But as the evening wore on, and Noah handled every detail from medical bills to arranging for a car to take them home, Mia began to realize something that terrified her more than any hospital bill. She was falling in love with Noah Morgan, and based on the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the feeling was dangerously mutual. In a world where their differences seemed insurmountable, they were about to discover that the heart makes its own rules, and love recognizes no boundaries of class or circumstance. But every fairy tale has its dragons, and theirs was about to arrive in the form of Noah's carefully constructed world, where a relationship with his employee could destroy everything he had built. The real test was just beginning. The photograph arrived on Monday morning like a bomb wrapped in manila envelope. Noah stared at the image of himself and Mia outside the Italian restaurant, her face tilted up toward his, their proximity unmistakably intimate despite the fact that they had never actually kissed. Attached was a note in Richard Blackstone's familiar handwriting. Richard, his former business partner turned bitter rival, had been waiting years for an opportunity like this. "Interesting dinner companion? Noah, I wonder what the board would think about their CEO's unprofessional relationships with employees. Perhaps we should discuss this over lunch. Today, 1 o'clock, the usual place." Noah's jaw clenched as he crumpled the note. In his world, information was currency and scandals were weapons. Richard had just declared war. Across town, Mia was discovering that happiness could be as fragile as spun glass. The past week since Ethan's incident had been the best of her life. Noah had found reasons to work late when she did, creating moments of connection that felt stolen from reality. Their conversations had grown deeper, their glances longer, and the tension between them so thick it was almost tangible. She was filing reports when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Clark. You should be careful about the company you keep. Some games are too dangerous for girls like you." The message was followed by the same photograph Richard had sent to Noah. Mia's hand shook as she stared at the image. She and Noah looked like lovers, and while that wasn't technically true, the emotional intimacy between them was undeniable. In the corporate world Noah inhabited, perception was reality. At exactly 1 o'clock, Noah sat across from Richard Blackstone in the private dining room of the city's most exclusive restaurant. Richard looked like a shark who had smelled blood in the water. "You always were predictable, Noah," Richard said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "All that money and power, but you're still just a man thinking with his heart instead of his head. What do you want, Richard?" "The Henderson deal. You're going to back out of the bidding, and recommend Morgan Holdings withdraw entirely. The Henderson acquisition was worth $50 million and would cement Noah's company's dominance in the market for the next decade. Was everything he had worked toward for 3 years, and if I refuse..." Richard smiled like a predator. Then I send this photograph, along with some very interesting financial records showing how Ms. Clark's salary mysteriously tripled after your little fainting spell. To every major business publication in the city. I wonder what they'll make of the CEO who promoted his girlfriend and violated every corporate ethics policy in the book. Noah's grip tightened on his water glass. Mia had nothing to do with any business decisions. You really think that will matter? By the time the lawyers finish with both of you, she'll never work in this city again. And you'll be lucky if you still have a company to run. The threat hung between them like poison gas. Noah could survive a scandal. His wealth and connections would see to that. But Mia would be destroyed. Her reputation, her career, her ability to support Ethan, everything would be gone. I need time to consider. You have until tomorrow morning, Richard said, standing to leave. Choose wisely, Noah. Some things are worth more than one girl's future. That evening, Noah found Mia in her office again, but this time, he didn't feel the usual surge of joy at seeing her. Instead, his heart felt like lead in his chest. We need to talk, he said, closing the door behind him. Something in his tone made Mia look up sharply. The warmth that had grown between them over the past weeks was nowhere to be found in his eyes. What's wrong? Noah sat across from her, every line of his body rigid with control. This thing between us, whatever it is, it has to stop. The words hit Mia like physical blows. I don't understand. We work together. I'm your boss. The situation is inappropriate, and it needs to end before it damages both our careers. Stood slowly, her face pale, but her voice steady.
Always.
Is this about the photograph? Noah's poker face flickered for just a moment, but it was enough. Someone sent it to me too, Mia continued, along with a very clear threat about staying away from you. And you understand why this conversation is necessary. No, I don't. Mia's voice grew stronger, anger beginning to burn away the hurt. I understand that someone is trying to manipulate us, but I don't understand why you're letting them succeed. Because I have responsibilities, Noah snapped, his own pain making him cruel. I have a company to run, people who depend on me. I can't throw it all away for what? For someone like me? Mia's eyes flashed with a fury he had never seen before, someone who isn't worth the risk. That's not what I meant.
Isn't it?
Mia gathered her things with sharp, efficient movements. You know what the real problem is, Noah? It's not the photograph or the threats or even the business implications. It's that deep down, you're terrified that what you feel for me is real, and you don't know how to handle anything you can't control or buy. She headed for the door, then turned back to deliver one final blow. I thought you were different. I thought you were brave enough to fight for something that mattered. But you're just another rich man who thinks people like me are disposable. When the stakes get too high, the door closed behind her with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot in the empty office. Noah sat alone in the silence, her words cutting deeper than any business rival ever could. She was right, and that made it infinitely worse. He pulled out his phone and called Richard. I'll withdraw from the Henderson deal, he said when his enemy answered. But this ends here. No more threats, no more games. Smart choice, Richard purred. I always knew you'd see reason. But as Noah ended the call, he realized that winning this battle might have cost him the only war that truly mattered. War for his own soul. 2 days later, Mia submitted her resignation. She found a new job within a week, working for a small nonprofit that paid half what Noah had been giving her. The financial stress returned like an old wound reopening, but she told herself it was worth it for her self-respect. Ethan, however, was not fooled by her explanations. You're in love with him, he said. One evening as they shared another dinner of pasta and canned sauce, that's ridiculous. And he's in love with you too, which is why you're both miserable. Ethan, Mia, I've watched you sacrifice everything for me for 5 years. I've seen you give up your dreams, your social life, every chance at happiness. All to take care of me. But I'm not a kid anymore. If you throw away love because you think it's too complicated or risky, I'll never forgive you. That night, Mia lay awake staring at the ceiling, her brother's words echoing in her mind. For the first time since their parents died, someone else was asking her to take a leap of faith. The question was whether she was brave enough to jump. Meanwhile, across the city in his empty penthouse, Noah stared out at the lights of the city. he had conquered, but which suddenly felt meaningless without someone to share it with. He had saved his company and destroyed his heart in the process. But sometimes the most important battles are the ones we fight after we think we've already lost the war. And this story was far from over. 3 months had passed since Mia walked out of Noah's life, and he had become a man possessed, not by greed or ambition, but by a relentless need to make things right. The Henderson deal that had cost him everything sat abandoned on his desk, the contracts unsigned despite Richard Blackstone's victory. Instead, Noah had spent every waking hour doing something he had never done before, investigating his enemy with the thoroughness of a man who had nothing left to lose. What he found was a web of corruption that made his blood run cold. Richard had been embezzling from his own company for years, using shell corporations and fake contracts to hide his crimes. More damaging still, he had been bribing city officials to secure construction permits, a federal offense that would destroy him if exposed. But Noah wasn't interested in destruction anymore. He was interested in justice. On a cold February morning, Noah walked into the FBI field office in Lower Manhattan, carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would send Richard Blackstone to prison for the next 20 years. "Hush, Mr. Morgan," Agent Sarah Chen said as she reviewed the documents. "This is incredibly comprehensive. How long have you been gathering this information?" "Long enough," Noah replied. "Richard Blackstone destroyed something precious to me. I want to make sure he never has the power to hurt anyone else again." 2 weeks later, the news broke like a thunderclap across the financial world. Richard Blackstone, once one of New York's most powerful businessmen, was arrested at his Park Avenue penthouse on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and federal corruption. The photograph he had used to threaten Noah became meaningless overnight. No one cared about a CEO's dinner companion when they were too busy scrambling to distance themselves from a man facing life in prison. But Noah's victory felt hollow without the one person who would have understood why it mattered. Mia first learned about Richard's arrest from the evening news. She was sitting in her tiny apartment, helping Ethan with his calculus homework, when Noah's face appeared on the screen beside a reporter discussing the scandal. "The investigation was initiated by an anonymous tip," the reporter said. "But sources close to the FBI suggest that Noah Morgan, CEO of Morgan Holdings, provided crucial evidence that led to Blackstone's downfall." Ethan looked at his sister sharply. "That's him, isn't it? The guy from the hospital?" Mia nodded, her heart racing as she understood the implications. Noah had taken down the man who had torn them apart. But more than that, he had done it quietly. Without fanfare or public vindication, he hadn't been seeking glory or revenge. He had been seeking justice. The next morning, Mia arrived at her job at the nonprofit to find a delivery waiting for her. A single white envelope with her name written in Noah's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter that made her hands tremble as she read. "Mia, by now you've seen the news about Richard Blackstone. I want you to know that every piece of evidence I gathered, every hour I spent building the case against him, was done with one thought in mind. You were right about me that night in the office. I was a coward who chose the easy path over the right one. But you also told me something else that has haunted me every day since you left. You said I didn't know how to fight for something that mattered. You were wrong about that. I do know how to fight. I just had to learn what was worth fighting for. It was never the company, or the money, or the power. It was you. It was always you. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for a second chance because I threw away the first one. I'm simply asking you to know that loving you, even for those few stolen weeks, was the most real thing that has ever happened to me. The woman who saw something in me when no one else did deserves to know that she changed a man who thought he was beyond redemption. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that you were right about something else too. Some things are worth more than business deals and corporate empires. You're worth everything. Forever yours, whether you want me or not." Noah Mia read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face with each pass. Her coworkers gave her concerned looks, but she barely noticed them. All she could think about was the man who had torn down his enemy, not for revenge, but for love. That evening, she found herself standing outside Morgan Holdings as the sun set over Manhattan. The building stretched toward the sky like a monument to ambition. But all she could think about was the man somewhere inside who had learned to value something more precious than success. She took the elevator to the 42nd floor, her heart hammering against her ribs. The executive wing was mostly empty, but light spilled from Noah's corner office into the darkened hallway. She found him at his desk, surrounded by papers, and looking more exhausted than she had ever seen him. When he looked up and saw her standing in his doorway, the shock on his face was so complete that she almost smiled. Mia, her name was barely a whisper on his lips. "I got your letter," she said, stepping into the office that held so many memories. Noah stood slowly, as if she might disappear if he moved too quickly. "I didn't expect you to come. Didn't expect to come either." Mia moved closer, drinking in the sight of him. "But then I realized something. You said you learned what was worth fighting for, but you never actually fought for it." Confusion flickered across his features. "I don't understand." "Taking down Richard Blackstone was justice, Noah. It was right and necessary and brave. But it wasn't fighting for us. It was cleaning up the mess that kept us apart." She was standing directly in front of him now, close enough to see the exhaustion and longing in his green eyes. "Fighting for us would look different," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It would look like you swallowing your pride and asking me to come back. It would look like you being willing to face whatever gossip or scandal comes from loving someone like me. It would look like you choosing me over your comfortable, controlled world." Noah's hands clenched at his sides. "Mia, you don't understand the complications." "No," she interrupted firmly. "You don't understand. I don't care about the complications. I don't care if people talk, or if the board disapproves, or if some magazine prints our picture. I care about you. The question is, do you care enough about me to stop hiding behind excuses?" The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross, and Noah did something that surprised them both. "Ah," he laughed. The sound rich and genuine and full of wonder. "You're incredible," he said, shaking his head. "You walk back into my life and immediately call me out for being a coward again." "Because you are being a coward again," Mia replied, but her tone was gentle now. "The brave thing isn't protecting me from your world, Noah. The brave thing is trusting me to handle it beside you." Noah reached up to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I love you," he said simply. "I love your strength and your compassion and the way you see the best in people, even when they can't see it in themselves. I love that you chose your brother over your dreams without a moment's hesitation. And I love that you're brave enough to demand better from me when I'm too afraid to demand it from myself." "I love you too," Mia whispered. "I love that you took care of Ethan at the hospital without being asked. I love that you brought down Richard Blackstone, not for revenge, but for justice. And I love that underneath all that armor you wear, you're just a man who wants to matter to someone." "You make me matter," Noah said, his forehead resting against hers. "You make everything matter." When he kissed her, it was with 5 months of longing and regret and desperate hope. It was the kiss of a man who had learned the difference between what he wanted and what he needed, and discovered they were the same thing. When they finally broke apart, breathless and clinging to each other, Mia smiled through her tears. "So, what happens now?" Noah said, his voice rough with emotion. "I spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the woman who saved me from myself. And I spend the rest of mine reminding you that you don't have to prove anything. You just have to stay." 6 months later, society pages were full of speculation about Noah Morgan's relationship with his former employee. Now the director of his newly established charitable foundation. Some called it scandalous, others called it romantic. Mia and Noah called it love. Ethan, now thriving in his senior year thanks to a scholarship from the Morgan Foundation, called it about time. And late at night, when they lay in each other's arms in the penthouse that had become their home, Noah would sometimes think about the afternoon when his world had tilted off its axis. How a moment of weakness had led to the greatest strength. He had ever known how the woman who had caught him when he was falling had taught him how to fly. Some love stories begin with fairy tale meetings and proceed smoothly to happily ever after. Others begin with collapse and chaos, with mistakes and misunderstandings. with two people who have to learn that love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing each other again and again, even when the choice is hard. Especially when the choice is hard, and in the end, that's exactly what Noah and Mia did. They chose each other over fear, over convenience, for the safe path that would have kept them apart. They chose love. Asterisk, asterisk. The end asterisk. Like this video if the story touched your heart. And subscribe for more.